Zug, Switzerland. Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you may be. On behalf of CV Labs, Zug, and Crestcom Switzerland, welcome to our session today. Lead your team through change. Have you heard about that enough? Change seems to be always going on around us all the time, and this is going to be another exciting talk about change, and I'm really hopeful that you're going to get some new insights on how to lead your team through change, especially in the current times, and things are indeed shifting in the business world and with a lot of organizations, and I think with our eclectic panel tonight, you're going to get some nice insights, perhaps some new skills you're going to learn, and definitely some perspective on what's going on with teamwork in times of change. Back in July, we had our first session here at the CV Labs in Zug. My colleague here, Patrick, gave a talk. It was addressed more on like a theoretical level on leadership styles and skills and what we're doing around accountability and trust and communication. And today it's going to be a bit more applied. We were invited to come back. They said we had a good response in the session, and can you guys come back and do another one for us? And we said, yeah, let's do it, but let's try to get some real people here working in the world of change or having experiences to share to bring these things to life. So that's what our group is here going to do today with us. So basically the 3 Ps, I'll call them, this is your first model you can take home with you, is what's the purpose of the session? Basically to learn how we as leaders, whether it's CV Lab, Zug, or whatever organization you're working with, how do we successfully manage change and create a high performance culture in the organizations that we're working in, the product or what we'd like to get out of it. Hopefully, as I said, you have some skills, strengths that you identify for yourself and identify areas where you can continue to improve for yourself and also with your teams. And then the process, we're going to introduce briefly the panel group, and then I'm going to let them each give a little deep dive on the kind of work they're doing and what they're most excited about around this area of change and working with teams. And then we'll do kind of open it up a bit and build on the conversation and see how we can start to glean some insights from what they're talking about, the different experiences that all the panel has tonight. So, and with that, again, thank you to the CV Labs here in Zug and Crestcom Switzerland for offering the session. We have people here in Zug with us tonight, and we're all practicing social distancing and the right COVID-19 rules. And so we want everyone to be safe and secure here. So for those listening or who will be watching online at home, thanks for joining us, and you can follow up with emails to Tracy Trexler. She is our executive producer with the CV Labs here in Zug, and you'll eventually be getting a link for the broadcast that you can share and enjoy for yourself. So, are all of you ready? Okay. Yes, so it's just some quick introductions so we know who's in the room here. We had a slide, but we didn't want to put it right on top of their faces, so Jelica Vetik is right to my right here. She's a change management advisory, I'll say that, and she's got a great background as a business transformation leader, some great years with UBS and Swiss Re, and she's going to talk with us a little bit about organizational designs and change projects where she's been involved, and as well as how do you ensure that there's sustainable change in your organization. So happy to have you with us here, right? Jens Beba over here, he's the associate partner and head of insurance at Inacta. It's an independent Swiss IT consulting firm here in Zug, and they are digitization experts. Is that right? We will say that, Jens. And working a lot with the insurance industry, banking, real estate, healthcare sectors, also supporting startups and established companies with training and software development. And they're early adapters of technology, and they do a lot of work with including blockchain in their business solutions. So welcome to the session here.
Great to be here.
Yeah. Okay, we'll go over here. Tomer Lannis.
Hello.
Is that right? I got it. Okay.
Absolutely.
Tomer Lannis, organizational culture designer. He's with a group in Lucerne. They're based called Lifetree Global, and they are. He's the head of the Ocean Regen Lab, and so I definitely want to hear a little bit about that tonight, which I hope you'll share with us. They work with leaders and around responsible business practices. That's one of the main themes of the work that they're doing. Tomer is also doing a lot of coaching, training, and mentoring, and organization development interventions. So we look forward to hearing a bit about that. And last but not least, Patrick Malcor, Managing Director, Crestcom Switzerland. Welcome, Patrick. Also co-founding and managing director of Precision Talent Solutions. And they basically deliver international talent management solutions. Previously, Patrick spent over 2 decades, is it really that long? 20 years in executive leadership roles in the public-private sector, 15 years as a CEO as well, and also as a managing director for multinational companies based in Switzerland. And on top of all that, he is also a former U.S. Army captain. So definitely some perspective to share on leadership from that perspective. So anyway, so thank you very much for all of you joining us here tonight. And to get us going, we're going to go into some sort of deep dive, I'll say, where you can talk a little bit more of what you're doing. In our last session, and as a lot of you working in the change space know, what is it? 2 of 3 transformation efforts initiatives fail. I don't know if you've heard other data on that one. So what's going on, and what often is the case, that there's something around managing people, the people side of change, that's often most challenging, and we have to get that piece right before we're going to make effective change in our organizations. So as I mentioned in our first session last July, we talked about it more of a theoretical level, and in this one we're going to try to bring that to life a bit more with our panel members. So what I'd like to do now is, why don't we start with Jens? You want to take a lead on this, the first out of the blocks, Jens? Introduce yourself again, or talk a little bit about what you're doing, how you do it, why you do it, or whatever. 3 minutes a person, just to
Many thanks.
go for it.
Yeah, you said it. 2 of 3 big transformation projects failed. It's a statistic. We have on our daily business the impacts of this statistic. What we are doing as a company, we try to give our clients the possibility to gain the full potential of a digitalization. Digitalization is not the target. It's not where we want to be at the end, but it's to be a better, more sustainable, more profitable company. And this is what our clients want to reach. And so our job is to help them. And by getting there, it's in our decade, I think it's not the technology which stands in our way. Normally, I think we can handle this, the technology. It is to take the people with us, to I wouldn't say convince them, but to make them clear what benefits they could have if they step in this process. And this is where we have the contact with all these change management things. And before I came to Inacta nearly 12 years ago, I worked over 10 years as a business and strategy consultant, especially in the change management field. And so over this time, I think things have changed for me, because I believed in this big change and transformation programs, and to reshuffle a whole organization like Swiss Re or UBS or something. Today, I would see this a little different. I would say, okay, I'm not sure if we are right, if we talking about tools in change management, about communication impact analysis charts, about all these funny things. I have all on my hard disk, or not on my hard disk, but my SSD stored for 20 years now. Today I'm coming from a more practical perspective. Mm-hmm. And you mentioned, this was funny, James mentioned Simon Sinek in our preparation speech. To be honest, I'm more with his approaches. Yeah. So this is, I think, where I'm coming from.
Very good. And the why. What is your why? Did I hear the why?
Yes, of course.
Did you start with the why? I think I did. Joking. No, that's good. No, that's
Thanks.
that fits well. Perfect. Thank you, Jens Beva from Inacta. Well, you're next, by the way. Normally I was going to do ladies first, but I thought that's not quite right, so we went alphabetically. We start here, Jens Beva, and
very good.
So here we go.
And then I'm Batik, I'm the next one. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, Alexa, please.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more with what you said before. In implementing a change, the technical part is the easy part. Whether it's digital, whether it is a big change of a strategy, that's the conceptual part. And the technical part is actually easier to implement. When it gets a little bit more complicated, it's in the people side. How we bring people to actually do things in a different way? How do we get people to get used to a different way of behaving in an organization? How do we mobilize everyone to actually adopt a big major change? And in my experience, and I've been accompanying a lot of teams working with changes, global, culturally diverse, complex settings. And oftentimes, the biggest challenge is how do we get the leaders actually to actually mobilize and support that implementation of the changes. It sounds very simple. It sounds almost like, of course this is clear. They need to support the change. What we tend to forget is that also leaders, they need to go into the change themselves first. If they have not processed what is the implication of the change for them, what is it going to be, how it is actually, how do I need to change in order to actually make it happen? They are not in a good starting position to actually support their teams to do something different. And that's often what I have seen where we tend to fail in those implementations. We go for it, we bring on the big plans, but the leaders, either they can be the best supporters of the change or they can be the greatest obstacle of the change.
Okay, I'm ready to hear more. If you want to share more, or we can wait till.
Oh, yeah, certainly I can share more about that.
That's good.
The part that we tend to ignore, we throw leaders into, okay, now it's time for you to support this strategy to bring this new change. Go for it. No time to really assimilate the stuff for themselves, but they need to support it. They need to share the why, but they still are struggling with identifying the why for themselves. What is the true intent of this initiative? What is the purpose? What we are trying to achieve here? And then, if you don't get that process going correctly, you will have the biggest detractors actually of the change. What I have observed, I can give you a good example. We were implementing this, driving this program, global program, and I had one of the leaders. She was showing for the workshop. She worked on the design of the whole journey. Yet there was some contradictory behavior. What we were trying to achieve, we were trying to get people to act more entrepreneurial in the organization. But then how she was behaving was actually not supporting that change. She was struggling herself internally because she didn't know how to behave in this new setting. She was expected to push forward, but she didn't know how to do it. She was coming from a different school, where she has been very successful. Control, command, I tell you what you have to do, and now you're asking people to take ownership and be entrepreneurial, and I have to let control go. Okay. She struggled a lot with that, and that's often what the work that we try to do when we drive a large transformation that can be successful with the right setting. We work a lot with the leaders, with the line managers, preparing them for that. Also with the sponsors, what are the tools that they can have that can equip themselves to make those transitions successful.
Okay,
yeah.
Good. We'll come back to that because I think we're going to pick up on some of these themes from our other panelists and also from what our viewers home and in the audience have told us. Tomer, would you like to jump in now? A few introductory words on your side.
Thank you, James. As you mentioned, I'm the head of Ocean Region Lab. It is a program for executive leaders and board members. We craft transformative, immersive learning experiences for leaders to master the art of responsible leadership. So it's responsible leadership. We just discussed that earlier. not really managing KPIs, but more their own character. And that takes, of course, that change takes some inner work, and it starts from within, but then they come back to their companies and they need to transform their companies in the same direction, and that takes a lot of change management. So the change management expertise needs to be there. And when we talk about change management, first of all, some people are allergic to the term. No, this is not something that we do. We don't have time for that. We don't have budget for that. And some people think, this is just a fluffy, touchy-feely thing that nobody cares about, nobody knows what it is, and nobody really can do it properly. And when we go a little bit deeper into the process, some people think that I'm a magician. And I'm like, no, actually it's basic stuff. But they say, no, this is magic. And somebody compared it actually to the stock market. Because the stock market keeps changing every day. All the time there's change. And it's very important for people to try to anticipate what's going on tomorrow. And it's very difficult. So many people get it wrong. What's going to happen tomorrow? Imagine that they give you a magic wand that lets you know exactly what's going to happen tomorrow and next week and next month. And not only that you can actually influence it. And the same happens in organizational change, because the change is constant. All the time, a lot of changes, real changes for the organization and for the people and for the leaders, and nobody really can anticipate. And everybody thinks, the culture is working against us, and they feel that the culture is like force majeure. They cannot influence it. And with a little bit of change management expertise, we come and say, no, actually, it is predictable. It is about human nature. It is something that is very predictable, not individually, but we look at groups. You know how they're going to react to certain situations. And not only that you can anticipate, you can actually influence it. And suddenly this has become very lucrative.
Okay, we're going to come back to that one too, I think. Culture and how do we motivate, right? Influence.
Right.
And do we control, or is the system running on its own somehow, right? Good, Tomer, thank you. Thank you. Patrick, your intro,
Yes,
dive into
thank you
this.
very much. Thanks for everybody being here. I think as an introduction, as James pointed out, I've been through a lot of different experiences. I've been working with the same partner, my business, good friend of mine, for 25 years. We went through a lot of different big companies, military, public sector, smaller companies, went through a lot of experiences. About 5 years ago, we had the chance to found a company where we wanted to make the biggest impact we could make and take on the most important challenges in organizations. And we decided, unanimously between two of us, and in all of our different experiences and different environments, whatever it was, the one thing that was a constant is the most important challenge, underlying what people said was the most important challenge, is always a people challenge. And the way to impact an organization in a positive way is to impact the people, whether it's getting the right people into the right jobs. We are a recruiting and talent management company working internationally. Whether it's helping to develop the leaders and the teams and the people running those organizations to perform at a high level. That's really where you can make the impact on the organization. And that's the most important thing, and that's what we founded our company on, that principle of focusing on those people challenges. Since the beginning of the year here in Switzerland, we brought the Crestcom International brand here and made it Crestcom Switzerland, and we're offering leadership development solutions to companies of all sizes, small and large companies. And I think something that Yelitsa pointed out I'd like to touch on is this. Our philosophy is to sort of de-emphasize or depressurize some of this talk about leadership, right, with the capital L. People ask me sometimes, are leaders born or are they made? Can you really learn leadership skills? Someone really smart asked me that very recently. And I really believe strongly that leaders can be made. Leadership is a skill, it's a little L, right? Sometimes we become leaders a lot like we become parents. right? Just one day we wake up and we're suddenly a parent, and maybe that's a capital P, and we're supposed to know how to do everything and figure out everything, and people are telling us what to do, and we have a new role. And I think that's how we become leaders. And I think if we sort of take the pressure away from that and think about it as a skill, you can learn it, you can practice it, you can get feedback on it, you can get better at it. And I think this is a great time in the world, an important time in the world to help people be more effective leaders, because we need better leaders in our world. So we're happy to do that work and passionate about it, and I'm glad to join this panel discussion.
All right, very good. Thanks to all of you for your first intros there, and I hope our audience here and also watching on stream has sort of an initial impression. And if you do have a question, by the way, you can put it in if you're on YouTube or on LinkedIn. Just write it in, and Tracy will be monitoring the lines, and we'll be happy to bring the question in at the appropriate moment. So now, for the four of you, you heard those intros, and I mean, as you were listening to each other, was there anything that stands out from what you heard each other say about what they were doing, or either similarities or something that's a common element from this first exchange that you had? Anything stand out? Just to get us going. We're starting now the discussion part of the session here.
Patrick, you're working for 25 years now with your partner?
Yeah, we were young lieutenants in the Army. That guy right there, we were young lieutenants in the Army together.
It's great.
And we've been working together ever since.
Why do you work together?
I think what you're getting at is trust.
All right.
Many thanks.
We're going there, all right.
This wasn't scripted.
That wasn't,
Yeah.
but I sense where you're going.
I think it's nearly obvious. So the guys behind INACTA, one of them is Ralf Glawischnik, and me, we're working for nearly 20 years together. And yes, I think this is something, I think it's very important, and it can be mentioned often enough, because I think you trust each other blindly, and so this reduces complexity in an enormous scale.
Yeah. Don't say blindly, but
Come on now.
you're right about that. Well, we talked about that at the session we had on 16th of July,
Yes.
the more theoretical session, the fundamental concept. You know what I mean? And you said it at the beginning, which I totally agree with in our pre-discussion. You know, we can talk about all this change management and frameworks or culture or all this other stuff, but if we don't have trust, we don't get it. Nothing else happens. And so that's a fundamental concept. One of the biggest reasons change fails is people don't trust the architects of change.
Yes.
So that's definitely a fundamental concept.
Yes, this is what Sinitza says. If you're not able to transform the leaders to believe what they have to, what they want to say, what they have to say, you shouldn't start with a change program.
It's not going to happen, and that when you actually believe in something, you're driving an initiative, but you actually don't really stand behind it. You will not come across as authentic. People will see that immediately. And nobody likes to be feeling that they are being lied to, that they are not being, the leaders are not being honest with them. So definitely the trust part, the authenticity part is critical for leaders to actually demonstrate that and stand behind. Also, it's actually about being able to articulate, because they might believe in it, but they are not able to articulate it. So it's a combination of things as well. What is the true intent, the true purpose, the why, as we call it often.
I think that big organizations have this handicap that small organization, if you work together as two people for 20 years, you don't have that. But if you're a big organization, first of all, size matters in the sense that you cannot care for 3,000 people, and you cannot expose your emotions with 3,000 people, and you cannot show your motives and align your motives with 3,000 people. You can do that with 1 or 2, maybe 10 in the family. But when it comes to a big organization, then the trust equation does not work if you need, okay, so reliability and the honesty that Yelitsa is talking about. I think we can expect people to speak the truth. And I think you can also expect a lot of people to be reliable so they do what they say. But the two other parts, the intimacy, how exposed I am with my emotional level with other people, this doesn't really work. I mean, how many people you hear in big corporations speaking about their emotions on a daily basis? And then the motives, I think that it's quite obvious that everybody in an organization want to work less and earn more. As you know, I don't know many altruists in a corporation that say, you know, I just donate my weekend for without getting anything back. So the interests are not aligned, and you miss the motives, and you miss on the intimacy, the emotions, and trust is handicapped.
And how do we build trust in organizations, right? Or can we train people to do that? Or is that something that just somebody is trustworthy? Or what's your experience with that?
And first, you don't want to build trust. You want to build trustworthiness,
Okay.
right? It doesn't make sense to have trust without the trustworthiness. But the trustworthiness, then I think COVID did us a huge service for that. Because I remember last year when people had to, wake up in the morning and put their suit and commute to an office and badge in and become a different person than what they left at home. And that dissonance between the private person in my private sphere and the professional person in the business sphere was quite distinct. And COVID blurred those lines. So the business sphere invaded our homes, our private sphere, and at the same time, our private sphere invaded our business sphere. So we get more people being authentic and being themselves, bringing their whole self to work. So suddenly you see a child walking behind and you can start talking about the kids or the picture in the kitchen, and you start knowing the person, and you start talking about the real person, including the emotional level. So the intimacy gets some bonus points. At the same time, the motives, because in the isolation, suddenly people started to care extra, doing an extra mile for each other. Oh, we cannot leave our employees isolated at home. We need somehow to talk to them on a different level. So I think that in the last 6 months, I definitely saw trust levels rise. And that's it's surprising when people are isolated at home that they actually manage to find ways to come together.
You were mentioning just before, James, about before we entered the conversation, you were talking about vulnerability.
Yes.
I think that is definitely a factor that helps to build that trust. Yeah? And that probably that window, seeing the kid walking in the back or seeing the personal environment gives that additional perspective, the human being. Yeah?
Right. And suddenly people see and feel that they all sit, we love saying it, right? They all sit in the same boat. Because everybody is under the same constraints of it's mandatory for me to work in these conditions, and everybody is under the same crisis, health and financial crisis, and suddenly people feeling some more common denominators that we didn't feel before. I just truly hope this trend is going to continue, and if there's any chance of going back to the office, that we will not live the authentic self at home again, right?
Yeah.
Well, also I would add that it also places a new load on leadership, because leadership has to be more authentic and personal and vulnerable to respond to people bringing their authentic selves to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it's easier in the past or in the dark ages before COVID. It was easy to just show up to work and act like you're just telling people what to do. But now you have to really relate to people as human beings.
Yeah.
And so it places a challenge and a additional load on leaders in the organizations to stand up to that challenge. And maybe I sense that's why you're hesitant about saying, will it work out? You know what I mean?
It's an opportunity.
It's an opportunity, sure.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm sure it will for some.
For some.
I'm seeing, for example, where it's normal for Mark Zuckerberg to hold town halls in a T-shirt since 2006. In the Silicon Valley, that might be the norm, but not in the Swiss finance scene, right? So you don't see many bank CEOs holding a town hall with a T-shirt. I've seen one. First time was April 8th of a CEO of a private bank in their cellar in front of the camera with a T-shirt. So I think that person was going somewhere
Yeah.
with that, making a statement, and maybe we'll continue that. But for others, it could be very difficult.
What is your feeling on, okay, this especially the current times now, are people resisting, I think that came up in the first session, are people in organizations resisting this whole new sort of reality that people have to work in, or are there ways that organizations are working with that? If there is resistance, or are people embracing the changes? What's your thoughts on that?
The changes related to the COVID-19 crisis?
Let's just say right now, or if are people in general, do you have the feeling that they're resisting all the dynamics going on with it, that they want to cling to what was? We're going to see in just a few moments some of the responses from online, but there was a few comments that were made about people holding on to what was versus being ready to let go and to find a new reality and to try to address the change in that sense. So
I think it's normal to a certain extent to resist to changes.
Yeah.
Because we all have our habits, and we love our habits and what we do on our day-to-day routine. And if you want to change, this is always, you'd always have to bring in some energy. Because if that wouldn't be the case, no one would be on a diet. Yeah? Or thinks he or she should be on a diet. Yes, and everyone would succeed. Yeah? And so this is not so easy, I think. Personally, from my personal experience, and so yes, there are some resistance, or there is some resistance from I think each individual. And the interesting question is how can we motivate people? Truly, sustainability was a word in the speech before. How can we give them a reason to change their habits? I think this is one of the parts. This is one of the leadership parts. To communicate, to think, to say what you're thinking, and to do what you're saying. Yes.
And let's not forget, I mean, you talk about resistance to the whole situation. Surely, for many people, for most of us, I think, the current circumstances are far from being easy. It's a huge challenge, a huge stress to be focusing and working at home, organizing all the additional things. You don't know when are you going to see your teams. In many ways, if you have a team and you used to manage performance in a particular way, now you don't know if you are more the type that needs to have everything under control. But you don't see the people. So what are they doing? Are they doing at home? Are they working on that? Or are they... In these uncertain times, you need to let go of these patterns, because it's not going to be helpful. It's not going to allow you to actually progress in any case. So it's going to generate first a huge level of additional stress. And even more, coming back to the topic about the leaders, is also their key role now to help those employees to have the structure, have the comfort, the ways of working effectively as well, despite the circumstances. Not the easiest time to be leading changes. Bringing a new full transformation program, not the easiest time, because it would require to have many additional things taking place, the connection, the caring about the well-being of the employee for it to be successful.
I'd like to add to this topic we talked about resistance to change. We talked about this on our last session, had some interesting follow. I think independent of COVID, but particularly relevant during this sort of changing time in COVID, I think, and from my experience working with leaders and being in organizations, I think there's probably still too much of the classic idea of the leader as someone who, goes off in the corner or goes off by him or herself and creates change and strategy and comes up with ideas and makes decisions in a small group and then sort of goes forth into the organization to influence them and enlist them and bring them forward into a better future. And I think that's a very archaic way of thinking, but still pretty prevalent in organizations, particularly senior leaders. And it feels like sometimes as executives, our ego is not served unless we have this classical sense of the field marshal leader organizing people into change. But I think that implies that change happens or is decided upon and then is sort of imposed as an external thing on people. And an important concept is enlisting others in change. And I think this way of thinking, this classical or old or kind of silly way of thinking about leadership as a isolated act is really, it doesn't reflect the way our organizations work today, right?
Or should work.
Or should work, or can. I mean, today organizations are networked. They have access to information. They become more transparent. Transparency is a value that wasn't a long time ago that people championed. People communicate directly with each other internally and externally. So I think one of the challenges in change in general, but particularly now, is to really see that as an opportunity to enlist other people in change so that change can happen and grow dynamically in an organization. And I think the job of a leader should be to see himself or herself as a facilitator of organizational learning. And I think this idea is ready to catch on more substantially in organizations, that my job is really to help the organization recognize change and learn and change dynamically, not on its own, but together as an organization. And then you don't eliminate resistance, but you have less resistance, because one of the things people resist is change they didn't create themselves, right? One of the fundamental resistances. So I think that shift is still, from my experience working with leaders, that's still a pervasive idea, and it's outdated.
I like the verb that he used, helping. And I really see that as helping, because as Jens mentioned, we don't like to change, right? James, you ask if we know if people are resistant. I resist. I want to cling to the past. I prefer to have here 100 people and not people sitting on the video. So it's very natural for us to resist. And statistically speaking, there will always be some early adopters, but there will be the vast majority of people that prefer not to have this change that is imposed upon them. And the role of the leader, as you mentioned, is the helping, right? Helping people through the change. It's not about convincing. It's not about imposing. It's not about it's not about pushing people towards it. It's really about helping, and there are many ways to help.
Okay,
Yeah, I think what Patrick said, the self-learning organization as the maybe only chance in the future to survive in a more and more complex world. Yeah? And so I think resistance is the one thing, and the direction of a resistance is maybe interesting to look at, because if you have a resistance from down to top, and they say, no, what my field marshal says, it's rubbish, and a few thousand say so, I think it's difficult to tackle and to turn the ship around. David Marquet, I think. And but if you have a self-learning organization where ideas are born at the basement and are discussed there, you have resistance. If you have resistance in a much more decentralized fashion, and I think if you can manage to build a culture of collective discussion and to develop things together, then even if there is resistance, and I fully agree, we are not all early adopters, but that shouldn't matter that much, if you manage to build an organization like this.
All right, good discussion. I'm very conscious of the time. We have about 5 minutes to go, believe it or not. It went really fast. Before we do that, I just want to check in with our live and local studio audience here. If anyone has a question, since you're right here, we have the pleasure of a real presence here. If anyone has a question, think about it, no pressure. We can take your question. And also the slide, I don't know if Tracy, if we have time for those 2 slides, or it's going to be difficult with the setup. Okay, so what you're going to see in the video replayback will be some of the comments that we had on the biggest challenges people had. I think some of you saw that. And also, what's one thing you'd wish your team would be doing now in these times of change? Was there anything that stood out from those comments? Unfortunately, we can't see those for the audience here, but anything, I think we touched on a few things. We talked about, one of the points was around trust. How do we know, managers, do we know people are actually working at home when they're doing home office? That comes back to, I think, your trust point. We touched on that. Was there anything else that stood out from those that any of you picked up on? Or
I think one of the comments that I saw there was around the topic of uncertainty and how to go around in these moments of not knowing, and especially if you're pushing forward or trying to drive a particular change and the outcome is not clear. You still don't know. You don't know how things are going to change. It can be very, very challenging. But what we can do is this situation is going to last for long, so it's not going to change anytime soon. So, but we can help ourselves. We can start to equip ourselves, equip our teams as well with the skills that you need to actually manage these uncertain times, and focusing also on building that trust, that connection with the employee. More than ever, employees need to have this sense of purpose, the sense of caring, the sense of my manager is we are in this together. We're in this together, and the well-being becomes a critical part as well. So we can do things. We can do things, and of course, the most important part for us as well as catalyzers of change or accelerators or whatever you want to call it is also look at after ourselves, because if you're not well to drive something, it's not going to fly.
absolutely, yeah. I was struck by even just simple things. I think a couple people wrote down, "Oh, I miss having a coffee with my teammates, and the team spirit is going down." And there's something around the social emotional energy that I think people are still struggling with. How do we fill that gap or find new ways to make the connections right with each other? And
I think some of the things that stood out from the comments and doing sort of similar events and discussions like this is how much the remote working is, I don't want to say it in a harsh way, but becomes sort of a proxy for leadership fundamentals that were failing prior to all of this happening. I mean, I think it's amazing that we're talking, people are talking about, how do I relate to my people and become more caring? Well, why weren't you thinking about that before? So I think some of the answers are people are stressed out about change, and it happens to be this change about remote working, and it's not to be trivialized, but the challenges are still the same. Empathy and relating to others and vulnerability and processing the change myself as a leader and standing up and being authentic. Those are still the same leadership fundamentals that we had, way back last year.
They are emphasized
that are
now.
important, but now they're coming out into the open. I think it's an interesting way that they're coming out into the open as quasi crisis when it's
I'm smiling because I see that difference between those leaders that team heads that know how to inspire the team. They set goals. They send the team members to meet those goals, and you come back. Oh, can I help you? Versus those people don't know how to do that. And the only way that they can measure performance is by the input. How many hours do I see my people sitting there and working? Suddenly they don't see them sitting and working, so they schedule the 7:45 meetings, that everybody need to have a green light. Now I know that my people are awake and they're working, and then maybe twice more before lunch, and maybe once at 5:30 in the evening. So I know that my people are really very productive, right? And you can see how that fails versus the people that set meaningful goals. They know how to delegate, and for them the transition is much easier.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I could keep going on all night long with all of you at this session here, and we will continue for those who are available at the local audience. Afterwards, a small reception outside and here. And thanks again to everyone watching on the replay. If you have any questions, you can reach out to the CV Labs here in Zug, and we're going to slowly shut it down so everyone gets sort of one last little nugget, something to share. It could be something that stands out from the session today, a wish you have for people and organizations working with change, a poem. I think, Tomer, you had a poem, didn't you? Or no. We were joking before this session about poetry here. So anything that you each would like to say, and then we'll wrap it up, and that'll be it. So whoever feels ready to go.
Around the horn, ladies first.
I feel the eyes on me.
Pass it on to those guys down there.
For me, the if I can leave you with a key message is for whatever transition you want to mobilize, make sure you first understand and assimilate and adapt to that change yourself before trying to influence or mobilize others. That would be my key message.
Thank you.
I would say I think leadership matters, and leadership still matters. It doesn't matter in a different way or a new way or a unique way. It still matters, and it's still something we can take on. It's not some abstract thing.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick.
I'll continue with the leadership. I love this concept. It's not a business concept. I think it's a human concept. And the way that we measure leaders is by how many people follow. And it's really the people that are, the followers that make a leader. And this is something that everybody can practice every day.
All right. Thank you, Tomer.
I would take the words from
Yes.
Patrick with this decentralization thing, and not the field marshal. Yeah. So we are working at a project where we are doing a strategy for a big healthcare organization, and they told us we had a board of two C's, CEO and CFO, and we learned, okay, this is not enough. We need more brain power. And we have to broaden our perspective. We go into 5. I said, okay, it's more than double. And I asked, what is about the ideas, the initiatives from the staff? And they said, it's difficult because we don't want to have to say no every time to every idea. And so, no, that's not a good idea. And I think if we want to sustain, if we want to succeed as an organization, we have to break this up and have to be 1,000 C's on the board. This is a challenge, absolutely, but I think if we can manage this, then we have a lot of advantage for changing things. And I think then we need not so many super sophisticated change management concepts. Very thanks, Patrick.
All right.
Great, thank you.
Very nice. Well, thanks again to all of you for being here tonight, and also for our prep sessions that we did. And thank you again to the CV Lab Zug and also Crestcom Switzerland for hosting this session. And thanks to our audience here. And if any of you want additional information, I guess they can reach out on LinkedIn to any of you, right?
Of course.
Those open profiles. And so please, feel free to connect with us. And we encourage you to keep leading your teams through change and these exceptional times that we're all in right now. So thanks again. That's it from Zug for this session, and thanks for joining us.